Hello, everyone. Nice that you're attending this webinar. We wish you welcome on behalf of the Young Earth System Scientist community, YES, and the Association of Polar Early Career Researchers, APECS, which are two global networks for early career scientists. We are very honored today to have the IPCC representatives to talk about the IPCC process and how early career researchers can get involved in the sixth assessment cycle. I'm Gabi Langendijk, and I'm currently working at the World Climate Research Program, and I'm part of the YES Executive Committee, and I will moderate today's webinar. This webinar was actually partly triggered due to a research that was set up by the YES community on what role early career people can play in the IPCC process. For this research, we conducted a survey and interviewed some key people from the IPCC. And if you wish to still contribute, we will make the link to the survey available later. So we would be really happy with your input. Although the research results are not fully ready yet and will only be published hopefully in a scientific article later, we are really happy to see that the IPCC has already initiated this webinar to tell you more about the opportunities on how to get involved. So today there will be 4 presentations of each around 10 minutes. And first, the head of the communication at the IPCC Secretariat will start. And after that, 3 presentations will follow by the IPCC technical support units of the 3 IPCC working groups. The presentations will focus on the roles within the IPCC, the experiences of being part of the IPCC, and how you can get involved in the upcoming cycle. Afterwards, there will be a Q&A session where you can ask your questions to the IPCC representatives. This will be mainly done through the chat box, so please type your questions there. We will keep track of all the questions and read them to the IPCC representatives during the Q&A session. If you have a question which you would like to direct to a specific person, please add the name of the person to your question. Then we can pose that question to this person. Okay, so I think we can start. And I first wish to introduce to you the head of communications and media relations of the IPCC, Jonathan Lynn, and he will give a short general introduction about the IPCC. And I will give you the floor.
Yeah, right. I hope you can see my presentation now. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm the one non-scientist here today, so please excuse anything I say that isn't rigorous enough. I think you already know very well the IPCC and its work. So really what I wanted to do is just remind you of a couple of key points to provide the context for the more substantive presentations that are going to follow me from the technical support units. Let's see. Yeah, so here you can see history of the IPCC graphically, and that's coming up to 30 years. One very important point to bear in mind is that we're an organization of governments. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And if you look at the history, in the 70s and 80s, there was a growing awareness of the problem of climate change, an exponential increase in the number of scientific papers being published on the topic. It was difficult for governments to keep on top of that. So governments came together to form a body that could provide them with a snapshot, a picture of the state of knowledge in the scientific community about climate change. So our role is to inform policymakers, governments at all levels, about what the scientific community knows about climate change. And if you like, the strength of the IPCC comes from this combination of governments on the one hand, governments requesting the reports that the IPCC does, bringing the scientific community together, setting the rules for the organization, and the scientists producing the reports that are required and requested by the governments, and then the two coming together in a dialogue at the end to work on the summary for policymakers of the reports, where the scientists, of course, have the last word. But it's a dialogue between the two of them to produce something that is very practical and policy relevant. And the role of the IPCC is to be policy relevant, to help policymakers in their work, but we are not prescriptive. We don't tell them what to do. We're an objective, or we're objective. We don't have a particular axe to grind or a particular agenda. So it's policy relevant, not policy prescriptive. Something else that's important to bear in mind, we're an assessment body. We don't do original research. We don't do original measurements of the climate or the weather. We assess published scientific research, again, to show governments this is what the state of knowledge is on the subject. We work on a voluntary principle. The scientists who work for us are volunteering their time and expertise, contributing their work and expertise. And actually in the same way, the governments who called us into being support us on a voluntary basis too. They provide us with voluntary financial contributions. A quick reminder of the structure of the IPCC. So we have 3 working groups. Working group 1, which deals with the physical science basis of climate change. So is the climate changing? How do we know what's causing it? What could happen next? Impacts and adaptation. So if the climate's changing, what's that doing to ecosystems? What's that doing to human society? How are they adjusting? And mitigation of climate change. What can we do to prevent further climate change from happening? And then a 4th important part, not represented on today's schedule, it's the Task Force on National Greenhouse Gas Inventories, which provides governments with methodologies for measuring their greenhouse gas emissions and removals. But on the slide in front of you, you can see the history of the IPCC. So in 30 years, we've done 5 major comprehensive assessment reports covering the whole range of climate change and related topics. And the first one of those in 1990 led to the creation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, so the international negotiating mechanism for dealing with climate change. The 5th one, which was completed in 2014, was the key input, scientific input into the Paris Agreement, which brings the global community together to tackle climate change. And we're having finished the 5th assessment report a couple of years ago. We're now embarking on the 6th assessment report and the related materials around that, related products around that, as well as doing these 5 blockbusters every 6 or 7 years. We also do special reports on particular topics that are requested by governments. And at the moment, we're working on one called Global Warming of 1.5 degrees. That's to be delivered in September next year. It was requested by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change when it reached the Paris Agreement, because that will feed into a first review of the global efforts to tackle climate change under the Paris Agreement that will take place at the end of next year. And then we're also working on 2 other special reports, one on the ocean and cryosphere, and one on basically various aspects of land use. We're also updating the methodologies. You'll hear more about these later on from my colleagues. And then the 6th assessment report proper, the full assessment report, which follows on from those special reports. The working group contributions will come out in the course of 2021, and it will be finished with a synthesis report, which brings all those working group contributions and the special reports. It integrates all of those into a shorter, policy-friendly document, and that is coming out in 2022, a year before the first so-called global stocktake under the Paris Agreement, when people will look at the progress they're making, whether the contributions they're making to tackle climate change are sufficient. So I'll stop there. Just well, I'll give you a couple of statistics before I stop. You'll see, you'll hear more about some of these different roles later on, but the number of authors doubled between the 4th assessment report in 2007 and the 5th assessment report in 2013 and 14. We're about to approve the outlines of the 6th assessment report, and then we'll start recruiting authors for that later this year. It might be of interest to you is that in the fifth assessment report, about 63% of the authors who worked on it were new to the IPCC process. So we aim for a mixture of people who have experience of the IPCC and who are new to it. So that was on the fifth assessment report. For the report on 1.5 degrees that we're working on now, that proportion is lower. It's to about 26%. So that's a smaller report, 86 authors altogether. On the other hand, the other things that we look for when we're recruiting, the most important thing obviously is the relevant expertise of the authors. But we also, within that, we try to aim for a balance between developed and developing countries and gender balance. So, for instance, on the fifth assessment report, we had about 36% of people from developing countries, up slightly from 31%. In the fourth assessment report, that's gone up to 51% on the 1.5 degrees report. And gender balance, which is still a bit of a work in progress, we had 21% of the author team in the fifth assessment report were women, and that's gone up to 38% in the 1.5 degrees report. So lastly, the best way to keep in touch with what the IPCC is up to, and some of the information you'll be hearing about later from my colleagues it comes through these channels, is to follow us on social media and obviously look at the website. But everything of significance that we put on the website, we put out on Facebook or Twitter and some of the other channels there. So you might want to make a note of those. Well, I'm going to stop there and hand you back to Gabby.
Very good introduction into the IPCC. Then we continue with Renée van Diemen, who is a scientist at the IPCC Working Group 3 Technical Support Unit. And she will tell you a bit more about what roles are there within the IPCC. And I will just give you the floor. 1 second. Great, Renée.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me, in which case I will start the presentation. Great. So I'm going to talk briefly about what roles there are within the IPCC, and hopefully keep it quite short. But if you have any questions at the end, please do feel free to ask. So I guess the main question is, how can you get involved within the IPCC? Well, the IPCC produces assessments, which it really can't do without literature. So contributing to the existing body of knowledge and the existing literature through articles in peer-reviewed journals, or going to conferences, or even gray peer-reviewed literature is the essential foundation on which the IPCC produces its assessments, because IPCC reports can only be as good as the available literature. Secondly, you could nominate yourself for IPCC meetings. There's a whole bunch of co-sponsored workshops where the IPCC partners with different institutions and different organizations to discuss specific topics that you could attend and get involved in. The IPCC itself also organizes expert meetings on specific issues. There are a number of scoping meetings, and these are the meetings where experts come together and discuss what the IPCC reports should involve and should discuss themselves. Or you could attend outreach events. And for information on all of these events, you can go to the IPCC website. A whole list will be on there, and as they come along, they'll be updated on the IPCC website as well. As Jonathan said, it's a pretty great resource. You could become involved as an expert reviewer. This will be talked about a little bit later in the later presentations as well, or as an author or review editor. So as Jonathan said, hundreds of experts contribute their time and volunteer to take part in the IPCC. This also involves as an author or review editor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how what these different authors are and what that entails. So each report consists of a number of chapters, and within each chapter, you've got a number of roles. Coordinating lead authors are responsible for major sections of the report. As their name suggests, they coordinate the rest of the authors and make sure that the report the chapter gets delivered as well. Review editors ensure that all the comments from the review in the process are taken into consideration by the team. So they are also very important to make sure that the wide range of scientific knowledge is represented. And all of these coordinating lead authors, and review editors attend lead author meetings, and there are 4 per report in each cycle. So it's quite time intensive, but it's very, very rewarding. I'm sure Elvira will talk a little bit more about that later in the call. To become a CLA, LA, or RE, these are selected following a call for nominations, and people are proposed by the IPCC focal points from governments and observer organizations, and they can be proposed by the IPCC Bureau. They're then selected by the Bureau of the relevant IPCC working group or task force, and the Bureau takes into account expertise, of course, and also balance criteria such as region and gender, developed, developing country. So the call for nominations to be part of these teams all gets published on the IPCC website as well. The only one in that little list that I haven't mentioned yet are lead authors, and that they are usually also a mix of IPCC experienced experts and authors that are new to the IPCC. And lead authors and CLAs are collectively responsible for the content of a chapter team. They're usually a mixture of expertise, so that different expertises are represented within the whole team that deals with that chapter. And they also attend all of the lead author meetings, like I said before. So coordinating lead authors, and review editors are usually a little bit more established in their careers, even if they are new to the IPCC, but that doesn't mean you should hesitate to nominate yourselves, because if you don't put yourself forward, you're definitely not going to get selected. And you might have the relevant expertise to fill a gap, or have knowledge about a topic that no one in the proposed list does, which might be crucial. As the nominations are proposed by focal points primarily, you could find out who your focal point is, and all of that information is available on the IPCC website as well. Then moving on to contributing authors. So contributing authors prepare technical information in the form of text, graphs, or data. They are usually there to fill a gap that the author team, so the CLAs and the lead authors, don't already have. So usually CLAs and LAs can enlist other experts as contributing authors to assist with the chapter content. So they provide very specific knowledge or expertise in a given area. They are identified by the CLAs and the LAs by looking at the literature on who's published on that topic in which they have a gap, or through review editors' suggestions, or through their own networks. And then we have the chapter scientists, and these are scientific assistants who provide support to the author teams. So this can be quite technical aspects. So this is cross-checking between findings in different parts of the report, fact-checking to make sure that everything is cited correctly, even cross-checking within the specific chapter to make sure all the sections are cited correctly, and things like reference management as well. So they're recruited either directly by the author teams, by the CLAs or the LAs, or calls are published via the IPCC website. So just to reiterate, how can you get involved? Again, nominate yourself for some IPCC meetings, or as an author or review editor, or as an expert reviewer, and really to stress to contribute to the existing literature and to help that grow. So your name might get cited in the reports, which would be very exciting. I'm going to leave that there and pass it back. But again, any questions at the end are very welcome.
Thank you very much, Renee. That gave a really good insight into what the roles are in IPCC and where people could already get involved. If you have any questions in the meantime, please type them in the chat box already. We will answer them afterwards. Then the second presentation will be done by Elvira Poloczanska from the Working Group 2 Technical Support Unit from the IPCC. And she will talk a bit more in detail on the experiences and how it is to contribute actually to the IPCC process. I will give the floor to her now. Great.
Thank you very much, Gabby. So I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
I'm here with my colleague Katja Mintenbeck, and we're going to talk a little bit about, in a little bit more detail, about ways to contribute and how to make yourself and your research visible to the IPCC. In the 5th assessment report, I was the lead author, and I'm now with the technical support unit. So I'm slowly gaining experience on both sides of the fence. So just to pick up where Renée left off, I'm going to start by talking about what literature does IPCC assess. So first of all, as you've just heard, peer-reviewed scientific literature, but also quality assured peer-reviewed grey literature. And it's very important to make your literature visible to the IPCC, because without the literature, then if the literature is not visible, then it can't be assessed. The author teams will evaluate the quality and validity of the reports. In the process of assessing the literature, they will capture a range of views and arguments. And one of the challenges is to evaluate the non-English literature, or the literature that isn't available through our more traditional scientific search engines such as Scopus or Web of Science. But non-English literature can be picked up, and it simply requires an abstract or a summary in English, and these don't have to be an official translation as well. So if we have a quick look at the climate change literature that was available at the time of the 5th assessment report, this figure is taken out of Chapter 1 of AR5 Working Group 2. And the authors here looked at the spread of literature across regions over different time periods. And you can see that in all regions, there's actually a growth in climate change literature, going from the yellow is the very early days of the 1980s up to the present day, which is the blue circles and bars. But there is still issues with balances between regions, or perceived issues. So these are from searches in Scopus and Web of Science, and you can see that the bulk of the literature appears to be coming out of North America and Europe, and this is based on the affiliation of the authors of the studies. However, there is probably literature available in the other regions, so it's very important for authors to try and tap into these pools of knowledge, whether that be through contributing authors or through other means. So I certainly encourage those of you who are working in South America and Africa to make your literature visible. So how can you do that? Well, for a start, publish. It's very important for early career researchers to publish, because this will increase your visibility. And some of this slide is probably more relevant to the Working Group 2 Impacts and Adaptation community. But when the authors assess papers, it really does make a difference. If you stop and think about how you're writing your manuscript, if you state very clear and relevant hypotheses or expectations very early on in your paper. And for the Working Group 2 community, these expectations can be based in theories, they can be grounded in experimental or modelling activities, or in historical data or paleo evidence. Very clear reporting and metrics and statistics is important as well. That makes the paper much easier to assess if all the information is made visible. And also be very clear in the links and mechanisms to climate change. There are a number of papers out there that claim a link to climate change, but the authors don't specify how or provide any justification for that link. So again, be very clear about some of those links, and if you know the mechanisms, present the mechanisms. So how do lead authors find literature? Well, searches and lots of reading. Author teams will read a huge amount of literature over the years as they start assessing them, through conferences and meetings, hearing about work that's been developed and talking to the people involved in that work, through networks, and that could be through personal networks, it could be through more official organisational networks. The CAs and expert reviewers play a critical role in identifying gaps in knowledge and in the literature that's been assessed. And often CAs will be brought in to fill some of those specific gaps. And expert reviewers as well, during the review process, can highlight where they think there's a gap, and they can actually recommend key literature to fill that gap. And I say key literature here because it's not a case of expert reviewers saying, you have missed my paper, but it's you have missed this, but rather you have missed a very important study that provides evidence for this impact, etc. The other way you can do it is to submit your studies to the relevant TSU, and we can then disseminate them to author teams. So if you have manuscripts, and this will be particularly useful for the grade literature, to submit those to the TSUs, and then we can make sure that that information gets out to the relevant author teams. So in the course of the assessment, the IPCC authors use uncertainty language. So the blue statement on the slide is an example of this. This is taken from the Working Group 2 report. And you can see at the end of that statement, a confidence is assigned. In this case, it's a high confidence. And there is actually guidelines that you can find on the IPCC website and read for yourself that provide advice on how to apply the uncertainty language and provide insight into how these confidence statements are put together. So again, expert reviewers can also play a critical role in this, because during the review process, they can state whether they agree with the statement, and if they don't agree with it, then they could provide evidence or justification why in their expert judgment they don't agree with it. So how do author teams work? So you've heard a little bit about the process of putting author teams together, and what will happen is the Bureau will select author teams based on region, based on expertise, based on developed country balances, and based on gender. So you have author teams who may not know each other previously, who may have never worked together, who are sitting in different parts of the world, and these author teams have to come together in very tight groups to produce the assessment. The lead author meetings are extremely important. It's often the only time that all of the lead authors, so that's the CLAs, the LAs and the REs for the later meetings, actually get together in the same room. There'll also be a number of informal get-togethers. So for example, if a number of authors are attending the same conference, then they may use that opportunity to get together and advance the work. Regular WebEx and Skype meetings, and using other collaboration tools as well. Because you're in different time zones as an author, you may find yourself on a meeting at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I have to admit, when it got towards the end of our draft, when we were about to produce our final draft and submit it, that I spent so much time on Skype that I was actually waking up in the middle of the night thinking I heard a call coming in. But it was just me dreaming. So the author experience can be a bit of a roller coaster, actually. There can be very, very intense moments, and then there can be more calmer moments, for example, when the drafts are out to review. There are highs, there are lows. But if you speak to everyone who's been involved in that experience, at the end of it, they will all say that they've had a very exhilarating ride, and they'd all get on and do it again. As I said before, that the authors are selected in teams, and it truly is an international effort. So you'll have teams of people from all regions of the world brought together. And again, this is a fantastic learning experience as an author, because not only are you being exposed to new knowledge and perspectives from different regions, you're also having to learn to work from people from very different cultures and different way of working and different languages as well. And I hadn't had a full appreciation of how important that is I hadn't had an appreciation before about how important that is in our efforts. So on the slide here, I'll just show you the chapter 30 author team from Working Group 2, and the flags show you the range of countries that were actually involved in that team. So just to finish, why get involved? From a perspective of an early career scientist, firstly, and most importantly, it's an opportunity to contribute to a policy relevant assessment, whether that be as an author or an expert reviewer, or through the literature, through the research that you're undertaking. By getting involved, it will increase your knowledge, it will expose you to expert debates, it will expose you to new perspectives, it will vastly increase your network. You'll start to become familiar with research that's been carried out in different regions of the world and the people who are carrying out that research. And also it gives you some research stimulus. You're exposed to where the gaps are. It exposes you to new way of thinking and where the cutting edge science is emerging. And actually that's something that you can take back and use when you're thinking about your next grant proposal. From an IPCC perspective, early career researchers bring enthusiasm. It certainly makes a huge difference having the younger researchers in the author teams, because they're often the ones who bring that enthusiasm and have the time as well to do a lot of the work. Early career researchers bring new techniques and approaches themselves, and they also bring new ideas and perspectives. So it's a win-win situation. So, so just some further thoughts for you. Become visible is very important, whether that's through preparing relevant presentations or introducing yourself to IPCC authors, to watch out for opportunities, and Renée's already introduced you to a number of those opportunities, so watch the IPCC website, and to publish as well, so to make your research visible as well. So with that, I'll pass you back to Gabby.
Thank you so much, Elvira. That was very, very interesting, and I think already giving a lot of new insights. Then we go on to Sarah Connors, who is a science officer at the IPCC Working Group Technical Support Unit from the Working Group 1. And she's accompanied by Anna Pirani, who's the head of this technical support unit, who will be available for questions as well later. So take your opportunity. Then I will give the floor to Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen? Yep. Perfect. Okay. So thank you, Gabby. Thank you for that introduction. This final presentation of the webinar is going to look more specifically at the 6th assessment cycle that Jonathan mentioned at the beginning, which I'll refer to as AR6 throughout the presentation. And it will give some more concrete examples of where early career scientists can get involved in the coming months to years. So just to quickly recap what Jonathan was saying, in the AR6 timeline, we've got 2 halves of how many reports are going to be produced over the next few years. And on the first half, we've got the special reports, which are going to be produced in the next year or two. The first one is the special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, which is going to be published in a little over a year's time now. And then a year later, we're going to follow that up with 2 other special reports on the oceans and cryosphere and land-related issues. These reports are going to be a lot more integrated. They span multiple working groups, so they can have a broader range of literature to assess compared to the traditional working group reports, which are going to be published later on in 2021. And finally, about 6 months later, after the working group reports are published, we have the synthesis report, which is supposed to be a summary of all of the reports in this AR6 timeline. And so I think just to make it clear for you guys to see where you can get involved in this timeline, I think it's best for me to give a rough overview of how reports are prepared. And this figure is sort of summarizing that. So for every single report the IPCC publishes, there has to be a scoping meeting, which will have a group of selected experts with a range of different expertise coming together for a week-long meeting to produce a report outline. And this outline will comprise chapter titles and some indicative bullets of guidance of what the authors can then write about when they come to write the reports. This outline has to be approved by the IPCC plenary, which is a representation. It is a meeting of delegates from the 195 countries that make up the IPCC. After this plenary session and the outline is approved, we then will nominate authors. Authors will be nominated through their focal points, and they will be selected. The selected authors will attend 4 lead author meetings, as Renée said, and these are indicated along the process as the gold stars. And once the first order draft has been produced by the authors, we then go into an expert review, followed by a government and expert review for the second order draft. There is then a final draft and a summary for policymakers, which is reviewed just by the governments. And the summary for policymakers is supposed to highlight the main conclusions from the reports in a shorter summary, which is about 10 to 20 to 30 pages, depending on the length of the report. And the final stage of this process is then an approval of the summary for policymakers, again by the IPCC plenary. And so this presentation is actually going to look more specifically at the special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees. And the main reason because this is the one that's closest on the horizon. Everything that I'm going to say about the SR 1.5, which I'll refer to it for the rest of the presentation, it is applicable to the other special reports and working group reports that will be coming out in the process. So where are we in terms of process for the SR 1.5? Well, we're actually on the 5th step where we're just coming up to the expert review of the first order draft. So this means that it's already gone through its scoping process, and these photos show the scoping process that happened in Monaco earlier, I think at the end of last year. We had about 100 experts that came together from all over the world with a whole range of expertise that came up with a report outline, a draft outline, which consisted of chapter titles and bullets for guidance for then the authors can take to then write the reports later on. And then once the outline was drafted, it was then taken to an IPCC plenary for approval. And these show some photos of the most recent plenary that happened in Mexico of March of this year. I don't want to go into too much detail about this report, of this slide, because there's a lot of information here. If you want to know more about how a plenary works, I'm happy to discuss this later on in the questions and answers. But essentially, the delegates from the 195 countries can get the opportunity to request edits and modifications to this outline if they think something is missed or if they want something to be clearer. They have that opportunity to do so at a plenary, and then the outline is approved once all of the countries agree to it. So it's a consensus decision. So after that happened, we then scoped and chose authors for this DSR 1.5, and these are photos showing the range of authors we have at the first lead author meeting, which we call LAM 1, which was held in Brazil in March this year. So there were almost 100 experts from 39 countries. And the purpose of the LAM 1, the first lead author meeting, is essentially, like Elvira said, you may not know the people that you're going to be working with, so it's an opportunity for the scientists to get to know their chapter teams, because every scientist is assigned to a specific chapter. And at the end of the week, they want to have decided who will be contributing and coordinating which section of the report to be written. And so that leads us up to the review of the first order draft, which the authors are rapidly typing away as we speak, and it will be submitted by the end of this week to the technical support unit. So the first order draft review is going to be available from the 31st of July to the 24th of September 2017. And this really is an excellent opportunity for early career scientists to get involved with the IPCC process and understand more and gain experience about what the IPCC is. So a list of requirements. It is a common misconception that you have to review the whole report if you're an expert reviewer. This is definitely not the case. You can sign up to be an expert reviewer and only comment on one paragraph or one section or one chapter. It's completely up to you, and it also depends on your areas of expertise. You may not feel qualified to comment on all of the whole of the report. Something to note, though, is that comments will be made publicly available after the report has been approved and published, and they are not anonymous. So when you submit comments, the authors will receive a table of all the different comments, and it will show your name, affiliation, and country of residence in that table. And additionally, it will be published in the report itself as an annex at the back of the report. In an IPCC draft report is that you really can valuably contribute to the shaping of this report. It really is a huge, important step in the IPCC process, this review, and it really helps strengthen the report itself. Additionally, you'll gain experience in the IPCC process, and you'll be able to expand your scientific network. If you're feeling slightly intimidated by the workload of an author, then this is a great way as a newbie to the IPCC to get some valuable experience without having to do as much work that is required from an author. And it should be stressed that expert reviewers do not go unnoticed. If you provide valuable comments and maybe highlight areas that may be missing in a draft, then there is the possibility of the authors in certain chapters might call upon you and ask you to become a contributing author if you're providing really valuable review comments that are missing in the draft. So this slide is just shows of what kind of comments we would be expecting from you if you were to become an expert reviewer, and there are three different kinds of comments. The first one is more about consistency checking. So Elvira described the fact that in the assessment we have to use and apply uncertainty language in how we assess the literature. And the first comment here is showing that there's an inconsistency. So it says, very likely seems to contradict the use of may in the next line, suggest reconsidering with uncertainty. And one of the rules in the IPCC process that if you make a comment as part of the expert review, then the authors have to look at that comment and they have to respond to it. So your comments are always taken notice of. And so here we can see that the authors responded. The text has been modified to remove ambiguity. Another a good example of comments is helping to improve the readability and clarity of the report. So what does spatial variation in SST mean, and why is it related to ENSO, Modoki? It's unclear. So sometimes the authors themselves forget that this is supposed to be a report for a wider audience, and it can be using some technical jargon which may not be clear for people who are not in that particular research area. And so the role of an expert reviewer can really help improve the readability and the clarity of the reports. And then the final comment here is really highlighting a research area gap that's missing in a draft. So the impact of ocean acidification on Caribbean corals is not mentioned, yet there's quite a lot of research in this area. And so this is a really good example of where if you think you spot an area that's missing in a draft and it's in your area of expertise, then you can put forward suggested literature they should be including, and this can definitely be an example of where you could be called upon to then become a contributing author in the draft. And so it should also be stated that you do not have to submit comments as an expert reviewer individually. You can actually do group reviews, and this has been something that's been done in the past in the AR5 cycle, where groups of early career scientists have got together and discussed certain sections of the report, either through online forums like webinars or Skypes, or in their own institutions where they've had brown bags, where they've just, instead of discussing a recent paper, they've discussed a certain area of a draft report. And this is something that you yourselves could organize and help yourselves to contribute to the IPCC process. And this is also something that possibly the early career network organizations like the WCRP and the YES communities could help organize for future reports in the IPCC or even the SR 1.5. And it's a really good way to help early career scientists who do not have yet the IPCC experience really get involved and understand what is required of them if they want to do an expert review. And we just like to state that the IPCC, if any of these activities end up being organized in the future, the IPCC would be happy to provide information to help facilitate and ease these discussions. And this is just an example of, this is a paper published in Climatic Change, and it's an example of exactly what I was saying before. In the AR5 cycle, a group of Dutch scientists got together a group of early career scientists. This was done online, so it wasn't just Dutch early career scientists, it was early career scientists from all over the world. And they ended up putting in a group review of, I think it was the working group 2 AR5 report draft. So if you want to have more information about how these kind of things can be organized, then this is a really good example to look at. And I've put this slide in just to really try and show how broad and interdisciplinary the special reports are and how integrative they are. It's not just looking at one particular area which focuses on a specific working group. The SR 1.5 spans all 3 working groups, and you can see there are research areas across all 3 working groups in this diagram. So if you, and this is not exclusive by all means, but if you think that your research area is shown here, then you really should have a look into the draft and see if you can contribute as an expert reviewer. So if I've managed to sell this to you and you seem interested, then how do you go about becoming an expert reviewer? You have to register, and this is available. There's a short online form which is available on the IPCC main website page. The required information, you have to put in your personal details, tick which chapters you might be interested in reviewing. You can tick more than one, you can tick all of them, and it doesn't require you to have to do comments in all of those chapters. And if possible, we'd like you to put down some of your recent publications to justify why you might be selected as an expert reviewer. Anyone who posts comments in the first order draft will also be invited to look at the second order draft and the further drafts of the reports. And this is a great way for you to be able to track the progress and see how your comments are really shaping and defining the the report and how it's been produced. You have to register by the 17th of September to be able to and so the last sections of this presentation is to look at the other reports that are on the horizon. The Land and Oceans and Cryosphere special reports are about a year behind the SR 1.5, and so they're currently up to the selection of authors. They've just been selected, and they will be meeting for their first lead author meeting in the fall of this year. But of course, the expert reviewers will be required for the first and second order drafts of these special reports roughly in about a year's time. And then looking slightly further afield, this figure on the left is showing just for the Working Group 1 timeline, but it should be noted that the first two dates in the figure here, so the September and October dates of this year and the February, they are the same dates for all 3 working groups. So if you want to get nominated to be a CLA, an LA, or an RE, then your deadline for doing so is the 22nd of October of this year for the main assessment reports. And like Renee said, you have to get nominated through your focal point, and this link, the top link on this slide, is a list of all the different focal points, so you can find out how to do that. If you want to have more information about the specific dates of any of the reports of AR6, then this is handily summarized in a PDF that is available on the IPCC website, and the bottom link there shows how to get to that. It's quite difficult to actually find through your website, so I'm happy to share that link later on if anyone is interested. But it summarizes all the key points and dates that you need to know for all of the reports in AR6. And so a quick overview of some of the opportunities to how to get involved in AR6. Obviously, there is the reviewing of the special reports and the main reports later on in the process. Additionally, as was stated, you can contribute through your own research. You can participate in IPCC meetings and outreach activities. You can become contributing authors or chapter scientists. And you can exchange with current and previous IPCC authors. And again, you can still have the opportunity to be a CLA, LA, or RE in the main assessment reports, but that's not until later on this year that the nominations happen. And so just to finalize, this is my final slide. Again, it's looking at the work from a Working Group 1 perspective, but it's kind of just summarizing the end product. The Working Group 1 AR5 report had 19 major headline take-home statements that were the big, hard-hitting statements that went across the world through the world's media. And that came from the summary policymakers, which was about 30 pages of 14,000 words, which came from the whole report, which was about 1,500 pages long. And then this next box is the more important one for us really, is that just in Working Group 1 alone, there was almost 55,000 review comments by over 1,000 experts. And that really shows that it's such a key step to be involved with this review process, that you do make the report as concrete and as robust as it is by doing this step. And if it wasn't for these these processes and these comments, then I don't think you would be able to produce these 19 headline statements with as much conviction as you could if this process didn't involve expert reviews. And so with that, I'd like to end and say thank you very much for your attention. And these are the lists of the emails for each Working Group TSU if you have any questions after today's webinar. And I'll hand back to Gabby. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was very interesting. I think all the participants have maybe already a really good idea of what is there in the IPCC and what can they offer to early career people to get involved. But we've received some questions, and I would like to invite all the other participants also to share your questions in the chat box, because we will open the floor now for a Q&A. And please, as mentioned before in the call, or in the webinar that you can pose your question, and if you want to direct it to somebody particularly, please add that to your question, and we will kind of merge a few questions and try to answer them all, the one that we received already, and please feel free to post other ones. Just to answer one question really briefly on if we will make this webinar available in the presentations, we will send you an email afterwards with the presentations, and we will make the webinar available online. We have done a recording, so you can always go back to the information if you want to further check it out. Then we have one question which was kind of maybe partly already answered now by Sarah, but maybe you can give a really brief answer still on when are nominations for meetings available online. I think maybe it would be possible to copy paste the link you just mentioned. This was raised by Kachamba. And how can one get notified when the commenting session is due? So maybe Sarah, if you would want to react to this, or somebody else, feel free.
Hi, thanks, Gabby. Yeah, so I would really point to the regularly checking the IPCC website for this and the schedule that I mentioned. I'm just trying to find the link, and I'll try and put it into the chat if that's possible for all participants. But that basically has all the key dates for nominations, for when the reviews are out. So it's really your go-to document for finding out how to get involved. Something to state that if you download it, it does get regularly updated, so it's best to check every few weeks or every month, just in case some dates have changed. So I would say that don't just download it and think that's going to be the dates for the next 6 years. It is not correct.
Hi, I can add to that. It's Jonathan here. As Sarah says, keep an eye on the website, but follow us on Twitter as well, because we'll put everything everything like that goes on the website will be put out on social media, on Twitter. And one thing I just wanted to check about the expert review process. So I think you mentioned, Sarah, that when you register for it, you're invited to give your recent publications, but I don't think it's mandatory to have publications. I mean, it's if I'm correct, it's a self-declaration of expertise. So you decide whether you're an expert, and we'll listen to your comments. Is that correct?
Hi, Jonathan. Yeah, that is correct. So you have to give your personal details, but you don't have to give your publications. So not all expert reviewers will be from an academic background. They might be from a government or NGO background who may not have traditional publications. But if you do have some, it's always useful for us to add them, just so we have an idea of your background and your areas of expertise.
Great, thank you. I hope the question has been answered for you, Dot, and please let us know if you have further questions. And then we go to two questions which we kind of merged on the relevance to the IPCC of current research they're conducting. One was raised by Mustafa Musa, and working on the contribution of the Nyong River, I hope I pronounced well, to the emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. I would like to know if the IPCC will consider my results. And then Kachamba, he posed a similar question to Elvira. Is research on forest biomass estimation models relevant, important for the IPCC? So maybe Elvira would like to give it a first shot in answering this question.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, very, very good questions. So I've got, my answer comes in a number of sections. So first of all, it's important to understand that the IPCC assesses far more work than actually gets cited in the main assessment report due to space issues. So it's the really seminal pieces of information that might get picked up. However, saying that, there are a number of special reports coming out. So for the person who asked about forest biomass models, that might be more relevant in the special report for climate change and land. So during the scoping meetings, what will happen is that the people at the scoping meetings will decide on the structure of the reports and the chapters, and they'll also the decisions made about the minimum research that needs, or minimum research issues, knowledge topics that need to be included in those chapters. So if you're wondering whether your research is relevant, I would certainly encourage you to go to the IPCC website to have a look at the documents from the 5th assessment report. That will give you some idea of the huge range of research that is covered in these reports. And then to go to the websites for the special report and the AR6 main assessment report when it comes out, and look for the chapter outline. So somewhere on there, there'll be a document that will give the chapters, it will give the research topics that will be covered under those chapters, and there will also be a document that actually gives further information on each of those bullets, and that's a minimum information that will be covered in those chapters. But certainly, if you have papers that you think would be relevant, again, I encourage you to send them to the TSU, and we can make sure they get disseminated to the relevant chapter teams.
Great. Thank you very much, Elvira, for explaining, for elaborating more. Then we will go to a next question, which was raised by Mohammed Rahimi. He asked, what is the mechanism for introducing contributing lead authors to the IPCC? And could lead authors introduce and suggest potential contributing lead authors to the IPCC? Maybe it could be an idea if Renée could further elaborate on this, as she explained mainly about the roles.
Hi, yes, of course. So contributing authors can be introduced by lead authors and coordinating lead authors. So again, they do this by looking through their network of who they know as an expert in this field, or they look at the literature and who has published prominently in that expertise that they're looking through, or through review editors, or even through, as Sarah mentioned, the expert review process. If they see a comment that's particularly salient, then they can pick up that person and ask them to contribute further. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. I hope, Mohammed, your question is answered. Please let us know if you have any further questions. There was a more general question. What is the definition of an early career scientist? Raised by Annette Bolton. Yes has a kind of definition of 5 years after your PhD degree, but it's rather flexible, but it would be really good to hear from the IPCC what are their thoughts about it. Maybe Anna or somebody else would like to answer this?
Yeah, hi. I don't think Jonathan will correct me, but I don't think there's an actual definition of what an early career scientist is in the IPCC. But I think we're using a similar definition of sort of 5 years since your PhD. But Jonathan, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we don't have an official definition of it. You're right.
Okay, good.
Gabby, if I can just add, I just wanted to emphasize that it kind of goes hand in hand with an approach used by the IPCC for encouraging renewal, that in the main report, I believe it's a 2/3 renewal, which is sought in the author teams. So it kind of goes hand in hand with trying to engage more with early career scientists, young scientists. The IPCC is very actively looking at renewing people who are involved in the assessments. It's not always the usual people. I just wanted to add that in.
That's good. That's also an opportunity to get more involved. Then we got another question from Mathilde Hagens. She was wondering if platforms like ResearchGate and LinkedIn are particularly useful for making your research visible to the IPCC.
Gabby, I can answer that again.
Good.
So when we look at the nominations for people who would like to participate in the report, so we just went through all the nominations for the 3 special reports, we look at the publications, number 1 criterion, basically your expertise and the research you're doing. And so we're looking at ResearchGate, Google Scholar, or Researcher ID.
because we want to know the impact of the research that's been done, and we want to look at the publications that are coming in the most recent years, say the last 3 to 5 years, to really see that the work that the nominees are doing is directly relevant and topical for the chapter that they're nominating for. And we don't really look at LinkedIn. So first and foremost, we're looking at publications, and it also includes grey literature. So for some topics, this kind of approach, especially as you move away from working group 1 to working group 2 and 3, there's a less emphasis on looking at impact factor and so on. And so we consider as well the most recent relevant grey literature and its relevance for the topics in the chapters. Maybe the other TSUs want to add to that, because I'm coming from a working group 1 perspective.
Yeah, from a working group 2 perspective, I can add to that. So certainly, as you said, that we are very aware that even looking on something like ResearchGate or Google Scholar, that we're still only accessing a portion of the available literature that's out there. There's a number of reasons for this. In some regions, for example, it might be that organisations prefer their researchers to publish in more local journals. There might be language problems, language barriers as well. So this is really where the author teams and the expert reviewers do come into play, trying to access some of the literature that might not be so easily available to, say, a researcher sitting in Europe, for example. Again, once we get into the social sciences and get into the adaptation literature, then the way of actually publishing changes, publication models change, and they might not be published in what we view as traditional science journals. A lot of the adaptation literature, for example, might be in government or in governmental or NGO reports. So again, it's very important for authors to be able to try and access this literature. There are guidelines for how grey literature can be used. But if this literature isn't visible, then it's actually not possible to access it. So again, this is where expert reviewers and contributing authors will come into play, and this is where we do encourage people to submit studies to the TSUs as well.
Good, thank you. I hope this answered the question enough. Please let us know if you have further questions. Then we got one question about how we can understand or estimate city-level climate change and its impacts. So it's a bit more technical question. Who would be able to give some insight in this? Maybe Sarah?
Sorry,
Gabby? Yeah, just to say, I don't think we could really focus on such a technical and focused question, but maybe Sarah can give an idea of how cities are being treated in the IPCC.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to end up saying. Something that is a bit more of a development, I guess, in this AR6 cycle is that there wants to be a stronger focus on the urban level and city level impacts of climate change, and how we assess the climate change at a city scale. And so there was going to be a special report on cities this cycle, but it's actually going to be for the next AR6 cycle and AR7. But there will be a specific meeting held in March next year, focusing specifically on IPCs and cities, which will go into a lot of the science and the impacts and how cities can mitigate and adapt to climate change. So it's something that's being looked at in more and more focus and more detail throughout the cycles of the IPCC. So yeah, that's not exactly answering the question, but it will be coming up more and more commonly in the IPCC reports from now on.
If I could just add to that from a working group 2 perspective, certainly there's a co-sponsored meeting on cities and climate change next year in Canada. That will be happening. And from a Working Group 2 perspective, cities have been identified as an important cross-cutting theme for the Working Group 2 report. We've got a chapter that's dedicated to urban areas, and there's also will be what we're calling cross-chapter boxes. So this pulls information across the Working Group 2 report on cities as well. So there will be an increased focus on the knowledge coming out at cities level.
Great, then thank you very much for explaining this, and I hope then maybe the technical aspects will be answered more and more during the years to this question. And then we got one more question from Sebastian Battiani, and I would like to say that this is one of the last questions we received, so please, if you have more questions, add them to the chat box, because this is a really good opportunity to talk with IPCC representatives and to get your questions answered. Sebastian Battiani asked, I understand that authors are usually scientists who do this work in addition to their research. Are there also positions at IPCC dedicated to organizing the process and getting an overview over the literature? And I think all the technical support units would be very good in answering this question. But who would like to take the lead?
You want me to start?
That's good.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that there are science positions, sort of actual jobs within the TSUs where postdocs are hired, or we have science officers and then heads of science who are people who, like Elvira, have been working a long time in research, very active research career behind her. And these positions, they support the work of the co-chairs and the vice chairs, who are the sort of the scientific committee of each respective working group. And they're responsible for their contributions to the AR6. And when there are positions open, these announcements go out via the IPCC website and the usual networks. At the moment, I think it's fair to say that the TSUs are quite well staffed. There might be some positions coming up in the near future. Working Group 1 is currently fully staffed. But we might also have short-term positions to help in the peak production times of the reports. So I think as soon as there are these announcements, they'll be very broadly distributed by IPCC, yes, APECS, and so on. And then there are these other jobs which you can get within in supporting the IPCC, so not another type of non-voluntary contribution. And these are the chapter scientist roles. And so CLAs, when they get selected, then their country or their institute may give them some additional resources because it's an incredibly heavy workload. And so they can often hire a postdoc, part-time or full-time, to support the work of the chapters. So I hope that kind of answers the question. Maybe other TSUs would want to add something. Is
there anyone else who would like to still add to this answer?
No, yours from Working Group 3, it's the same as Working Group 1, and I'm assuming Working Group 2 as well. And apart from the science role, the TSUs are also composed of operational roles that also support in the planning and the organizing of the meetings, which often also include some scientific input. So it's a good balance between the two. But if you're more interested in the operational aspects and the administrative aspects, those roles are also there. But for Working Group 3, we're also pretty well staffed at the moment, but things may change in the future. So keep an eye out on the websites to see if anything pops up.
Great, thank you. Then Sebastian had one other question. Can one see the draft of a report before registering as an expert reviewer? Kind of to decide if it's worth reviewing for me. Maybe Sarah or Katja or Elvira?
Hi, Gavi. I think you have to register before being able to see the draft. I think it's a requirement. It's not a public review, it's an expert review, so you have to register. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could register and not submit a comment. But I would very recommend at least reading some of it and submitting your comments at least a bit.
Yeah, when you do register for the review and you get access to the draft, one of the things you sign up to in Blood is that it's not for citation, quotation, or distribution. So the drafts are confidential at that stage. They, as you heard, they get published at the end together with all the comments and the responses, and the report is finalized. But at the review stage, they're confidential to facilitate a lively and realistic discussion among the experts. That said, they all seem to leak anyway, but we would hope that you wouldn't be one of the people leaking them when you sign up as an expert reviewer.
Good.
Yeah, just to add, they are confidential because it's really, it only comes together at the end. It's such a difficult process that the authors are going through. And so leaking messages in the first order draft of an IPCC report is really irresponsible and not really helpful for the broader community. And it obviously will happen. I mean, I think we can all wait and see what will happen with the 1.5 special report review. But there might be some media activity around some leaks there. But yeah, it's a confidential process at this stage. And just to add that those, you can definitely register and have a look, I suppose, but only those who make a contribution will be cited at the end and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was very clear. We still have around 5 minutes. So if there's still a burning question, please type it now because we entered all the questions from the type box. Oh, there are immediately coming questions in. Mohammed Rahimi asked, how to assess the capacity of institutions to adapt to climate change in a certain area. This is also a more technical question, but maybe you can give some insight if IPCC is dealing with this or how they deal with it. Maybe more from a working group 2 or 3 perspective.
Yeah, so if you have a look at the proposed outlines for the working group 2 assessment report, that will be made available after the governmental approval meeting at the beginning of September, and you'll see in there that there is a focus on sort of some of the I guess institutional and governance issues when it comes to adaptation. But again, the IPCC can only assess literature that's out there. So if this is an area that you're actually working on, it would be really a huge help if you could publish your research and make it available.
Great, thank you. Then I think we will get to the last question now from Yoting Huang Lachman. For registering to be an expert reviewer, citizenship has to be identified. Is it possible to add an other, in brackets, option to the citizenship for scientists who are not from a country which is not recognized by the UN? Maybe Jonathan could shed light in this, or Anna?
I think this is for Jonathan and the Secretariat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Probably you would have to put in the name of a country that is recognized by the UN if you wanted to take part in the review process. But I'll look into that. I mean, if it was a big problem to do another country nearby, which I guess is what we're talking about here, then that might be that might make it difficult in that case. But I'll look into that and try and get back.
Thank you. Yoting says thank you. All right. I think we had really interesting discussion, and I wish to thank all the participants a lot. And I think it's a good timing a few minutes before to close this webinar. It's the first time that we run such a webinar, so we would be super interested to get your feedback. So we will send a short survey around to get your feedback. So please, we would really happy if you could take like 5 minutes to fill this in really quickly so we can improve the webinars for the upcoming time. And then I wish to really thank you, very much for your interest and participation in the webinar. And we will record it, so if you have any questions afterwards, maybe it's worthwhile to record to watch the webinar, or to still post questions to one of the representatives, which was here by email. And I wish to thank you and have a really wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
This is a question to all the speakers, posed by, I hope I pronounce your name right, Foskehat Isak Hanyan. And this person is asking, are you going to include chapters for assessment and mitigation in city level? So it was probably, how are you dealing with mitigation in the urban areas? Maybe Renée, you would like to answer this question?
Hi, yes. As Working Group 3 deals with the mitigation aspects, I'm not going to go too in-depth about the technical and scientific aspects of that, but there's going to be an IPCC co-sponsored cities conference in March of next year, and it's actually planned that there'll be a special report on cities in the next cycle in AR7. It's not to say it won't be dealt with in AR6 at all. It's quite important. It's come up multiple times already, and the outline for all of the reports, including the full assessment cycle, are available online. So you can see how cities is dealt with across working groups, and also for the 1.5 report and all the other special reports that are out there.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to add to this from the other representatives? That's good. Then we can go on to the next question, which was posed by Saurabh Vijay. Could any one of you provide the statistics or simple numbers from the last IPCC report, in brackets, that how many early career scientists were selected to contribute to the IPCC report? Maybe this could be a question for Anna or Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't think there are any specific statistics on early career scientist participation, because we haven't, so the IPCC has not been tracking this in particular, but they do track the renewal of participation in the IPCC process. So when you're nominating, you would be asked if you've been a review editor or an author before, and so on. And so this is to make sure that there is a renewal in the selection. And in general, there's a 2/3 renewal for the authors in the main reports. I didn't have to hand the statistics from the AR5, but I was looking at the special report on 1.5. And in the nominations, 53% of the nominations had no previous IPCC experience. And at the end of the selection process, so from around 600, 700 nominations, to the 80 or so authors, it turned out that 26% of the authors had no previous experience. So this partly answers the question, but maybe not to the level of detail that Saruba was looking for. Maybe Jonathan can add something from the AR5 or from other statistics he might have to hand.
Yeah, no, you're right. We haven't been tracking this so far, though we're going to start tracking it in future. For AR5, there was actually a higher proportion of people who were new to the process. It was 63% were new to the process of the 830 authors. Well, that means they hadn't been involved in the 2 special reports of that cycle or the 4th assessment report.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this question. The same person, Saurabh Vijay, also asked if it's possible to get your travel to attend IPCC workshops or plenary sessions funded by the IPCC, or how does this work? Maybe Jonathan from the Secretariat or somebody else from the TSUs?
Well, the IPCC covers travel for people to participate in meetings if they are from developing countries. Yeah, that's really the division there. We don't pay for people from developed countries, industrialized countries, on the assumption that their governments or institutions can afford it. And that even applies, those are the official meetings. It doesn't really apply to the outreach events, although even with the outreach events, we sometimes pay for some people to travel within the country or from neighboring countries to take part in a meeting if those are in a developing country region.
Thank you. Then we have a next question from Pedro Lanillo. Can therefore only one country ban a research topic in the plenary IPCC meeting following the initial scientific experts' proposal? I think this might be a question for Sarah or maybe Katja or Elvira.
Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, I'll start and then Elvira can probably fill in my gaps. So yeah, because the IPCC plenary is done by consensus, where you have to get approval by all countries, then there can be a couple of sticking points. There can be tricky issues that that countries have to negotiate around. So if there is a very contentious issue, then a country could put up their flag and say, no, we don't want this in. That's a sort of political side, I guess, of the IPCC. But in my limited experience so far is that it's never normally as black and white as that. There's normally some kind of negotiation and a compromise is found. So it's not normally something is 100% not included. I don't know if anyone else with a bit more plenary experience wants to fill in the gaps. Elvira?
No, I think you explained it very well, Sarah, and that this is in the plenary, that this is a debate between the countries. It's very highly unlikely that one country will come in so strongly with such a strong justification that they could completely ban a research topic. That there is debate and compromise does take place. So it's I would say personally, it is actually something quite amazing to observe yourself, to see all the government representatives in play and to hear the debates that are going on. But as Sarah's pointed out, there will be compromises will be reached and the consensus will be agreed on.
Thank you very much for this good explanation, I think. If something is unclear after, yes, sorry, you would like to still add maybe?
Yeah, I'll just add, again, I have relatively limited experience. It's been doing this since a year and a half or so. But when it comes to the plenary discussions, what we've seen so far in the approval of the outlines of the special reports is that it's generally, there are strong discussions that can go on for hours, and with opposing views being presented by different countries, different blocks of countries. Sometimes it's an individual country. And then there's a whole process of negotiation. Is really a refinement of the wording, and it can be a lot of sensitivity in terminology and so on, but it's never a complete cutting out altogether of topics. And then as far as I understand, and Jonathan has more experience here, and Elvira, of course, in the approval of reports, so the SPMs, the Summary for Policymakers, are approved word by word, and these are sort of extremely intense experiences that can go on through the night. And because the content of these documents have such huge implications afterwards for negotiations and so on, it's quite a fight that goes on with politics and science representatives, hammering it out. And it does result sometimes in cuts to the content of the Summary for Policymakers, or changes to the words and so on, or changes to the figures, but it never touches the actual reports themselves. So what has gone through the peer review, the IPCC review process is not touched in the plenary with countries in negotiation. And so again, what is in the SPM has to reflect the content of the reports. So it's a really interesting way in which the scientific community actually has, I think, a lot of control over the content that's finally approved in the summary for policymakers. Then I'll leave it to others to add on if I think that something else should be added here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to still have a word on this? All right, thank you so much. Then we will go to the next question. This is a question directed to Sarah. Could you explain how the IPCC plenary is formed and how focal points are selected? Thank you.
Just unmute my mic. I don't actually know how focal points are selected. I think they're nominated by their governments or organisations within the government, the governments, and I'm seeing nodding from Anna and Jonathan, so that's how they're selected. I could briefly go over the slide that I went over quickly in my presentation about the IPCC plenary, just sort of to show the main runnings of that, if that would be answering the other half of that question. So Gabby, could you share my screen? Thanks. So yeah, as I said, the IPCC plenary is basically made up. Oh, sorry. I don't know what's going on here.
What's happened?
Oh, it's my computer's trying to shut down. Sorry.
What?
Bad timing. Okay, so sorry about that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so the IPCC plenary is a week-long meeting, normally just under a week, where you have delegates that are put forward by each country's government to represent themselves, but represent their governments and their countries. They come together and have a specific agenda. It's a UN, so as we're a UN organization, there are interpreter booths, which you can see a picture in the bottom left, where we have interpreters speaking into the 6 UN languages. The meeting is chaired by the IPCC chair, Hoo-Sung Lee, and members of the IPCC Secretariat and the IPCC Bureau. And so for the example of approving a report outline, all the delegates will be given the report outline about a month before in advance. And then they get this opportunity to ask for modifications and edits before they approve it. And the way they do that is they use their flag, which is their country sort of name tag. You can see in the bottom left, the bottom photo here. And they want to make an intervention to suggest an edit. And that's when they raise their flag, they put it on the side, and they'll state, oh, we want to have this wording changed to this. And if there's enough edits that want to be changed, then the IPCC chair will request scientists to go off and have a sort of contact group where they'll discuss and make some edits, and then they'll come back to the plenary showing the edits, and it will be reiterated from there. The photo that we can see here in the top right was basically, this is a group huddle, which is when maybe one specific thing, it might be a bit of a sticking point where one or a certain group of countries really want something to be put in. So this particular topic was over, this example was over the topic of loss and damage. And you can see a group huddle here where the engaged delegates from member states are huddling together to try and agree a particular wording, which they then take back and submit to the plenary, which can then get approved. So it can be quite intense sometimes, and as Anna was saying, when you're approving the summary of policymakers, that can take hours, if not days. But it's quite an exciting experience to see how the negotiations work. And hopefully that gives a little bit more detail into I guess the policy side of this science policy interface relationship that is the IPCC.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is anyone else who would like to still add on what Sarah just explained? Otherwise, I will move on to the next question. Next question comes from Stephanie Kipsey, who asks, must you be affiliated with a university to be involved with the IPCC? And what type of affiliations are required to contribute? Can you also be an independent? And do affiliation requirements vary by the type of contribution, like reviewer, author, etc.? I think maybe Jonathan is able to answer this question.
I'll have a go, but I'm sure the others will want to contribute. But I mean, to be selected as an author, you're so we're looking at the bureau of the working group. We'll look at your if you like, your reputation as an expert in the field. They're looking for a particular type of expertise to come into that chapter, and then your standing in that field. Now, for that, you don't formally have to be part of the university. You could be, and most people in practice are linked to a university, especially from industrialized countries, from a university, a government agency, or an institution. But we do have people from industry. I mean, very obviously, the energy industry sometimes contributes authors. We have people from civil society organizations, NGOs. And we have people from international organizations. So that's for being an author. For being an expert reviewer, it's again, we're looking for a very broad range of expertise. So some people will come from the academic scientific community, but others will be from civil society or from industry or whatever. And to be an expert reviewer, although we ask you when you register for your publications, you don't have to have publications. You might not come from that kind of field or background, and it's a self-declaration of expertise. You think you're an expert, so we want to have you.
If I could just pick up where Jonathan's finished. So not all of our authors or reviewers are affiliated with universities for the reasons Jonathan's just outlined. But it's probably worth just flagging here that actually being an author or a review editor in an IPCC report it's a considerable time commitment as well. It takes quite a lot of effort. So therefore, if you are going to nominate as an author, it's often best to go through your institution to have that discussion with your institution first, that they are going to support your time to be involved in the IPCC. And then secondly, if you get nominated through your focal points, it actually has implications for where funding comes from for your travel attending the meetings. So there might be very rarely sort of independent, so-called independent nominations, but certainly it's not recommended because you need to get that institutional and country support.
All right, great. I think that gave already a lot of good insight. I would like to jump to a question which was partly related from Katarzyna Tokarska. I'm sorry for maybe not the perfect pronunciation of your name. She said to direct the question to Sarah, please. And firstly, thanks for the great talk. And then she asks, since the focal points are chosen for each country, to nominate yourself as a lead or contributing author, would you apply to the focal point based on your country of citizenship or current country of residence, where you're currently affiliated with research institutions, in brackets?
Thank you, Gabby. That's a good question. I think you can actually do either. I'm aware that it's in the previous and current cycles, we've got you can definitely apply through either your country of residence or your citizenship from your citizenship of birth. I don't know if anyone else wants to add any more information, but I'm pretty sure it's just either. choose.
I'll jump in here. So this is where maybe some of your negotiating skills will come into play, because again, if you're nominating as an author, as a lead author or a review editor, there is implications for how you're actually supported to take part in the IPCC. So what you'd want to do is to go and speak to the focal points and see which of the focal points will agree to nominate you. As a contributing author, that's actually much less of an issue, and authors are normally listed in the reports by their country of citizenship, but we do recognise that isn't always ideal. So sometimes things are judged on a case-by-case basis.
And if I can add, I think if a focal point nominates somebody from another country, which they can do, in the example you gave, then they're supposed to notify the country of your citizenship. And just a reminder that focal points aren't the only way to be nominated, although as Elvira is saying, that has the implications for the funding, but you can be nominated by an observer organization of the IPCC. We have about 100 of those, and you can see the list on our website, and many of them are NGOs or universities or industry associations. And you can also be nominated by members of the IPCC Bureau as well. That's 34 of them.
Okay, great. That's good. We have a little bit also related question actually from Matthias Editor, who asked, does an early career scientist need any endorsement from the national focal point before contributing to the review of IPCC drafts?
No. I mean, to be a reviewer, an expert reviewer, you decide. You decide that you have the relevant expertise, whether it's for the whole report or one paragraph in one chapter, and you register and make that contribution. You don't need any formal backing or anything like that.
All right, great, thank you. Then we will go on to the next question by Nasima Amiri, who asks, can you integrate PhD students in your research? By meaning if you can get involved while doing your PhD. Maybe Renée wants to answer, or Anna.
Renée?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, as a PhD student, as I said, as an author, you're more likely to be a little bit more further advanced in your career. So the best way to get involved with the IPCC is to contribute to the existing literature and keep expanding on your work, because the IPCC assessments are all based on literature like the ones that you're producing. And then a little bit further down the line in your career, you can look into becoming an author or contributing in other means.
Great, thank you.
I can add, just to add, it might be that your results in your PhD are really topical and important for the content of the reports. So while it's probably unlikely to become an author as a PhD, well, you will not become an author as a PhD student, basically. You know, the author teams, if they are aware of your new results and your innovative analyses and so on, based on your publications, they may well call you in as a contributing author. And just to add that PhD students can participate as an expert reviewer of the drafts. So you can definitely become involved in that way.
Great, thank you very much. Then we have a question with a different angle coming from Pablo Borges. In this new area of communication, couldn't early career researchers play an innovative role in the exchange of information between science and policy? Maybe it would be interesting to get this from an early career perspective from Sarah or Renée, who are maybe a little bit more at an early career stage, who could contribute and maybe get a more senior perspective as well as how they look at it. Maybe start from an early career side, maybe Sarah or Renée?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then people can fill in afterwards. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic. I think it's completely. It's a brilliant opportunity for early career scientists to help spread and communicate the work of the IPCC. It really, so from my personal perspective, when I was doing my PhD, I also did my own blog in which I did a couple of blog posts communicating the last summary for policymakers for the AR5. And I found that really rewarding for myself because it really helped me understand in more detail about the IPCC, but it also helped communicate the figures and the main messages to a wider audience. So I think it's a really valuable experience for both the receivers of the information, but also the people who are creating and doing the communications themselves.
Yeah, if I can just add, I think it's a really quite exciting thing to be involved in the interface between science and policy. And there are so many different ways that you can create your own little space of doing this. So like Sarah starting a blog, or whether it's through, I don't know, finding relevant articles and tweeting about it, or finding ways in your own institutions or organizations where you can raise these issues and talk about it and organizing. Even if you don't work in a climate change related field, you could organize coffee mornings where you discuss these issues, or approach policymakers and discuss these kind of things. So there's quite a lot of things you can do, and it's quite exciting to think about how you would like to do that. I don't know if anyone else has to add from a more experienced point of view about how we could make a contribution.
I could just add a couple of things. One is you can actually contribute in that area as an expert reviewer. So you could look at the report from the point of view of how's it going to be communicated. So is the language right? Is it getting the point across in terms of reaching policymakers or broader audiences? So those sorts of comments can be very valuable as well in shaping the report. And then looking at once the report is there, or generally looking at the work of the IPCC, you can organize your own meetings to discuss and present the scientific findings to broader audiences. And by all means, if you do, then invite the IPCC to participate. And if we can find speakers who can join in, we will.
Yeah. Do you want me to add something?
Maybe something that you have seen in your daily practice, how early career can contribute in an innovative way.
I don't know if I can think of an example like that off the top of my head. I was just going to say that within the TSU, I mean, I guess this is an everyday practice. Within the TSU itself, we're working really hard on these aspects. And so we've got, well, Sarah's been very active, in this kind of interface with young scientists and communicating what the IPCC is about. Robin, who's another science officer, is actually in America at a Earth Geosciences Educators Meet, and want to develop ways in which IPCC products can be used in teaching, for example. And so we're going off into all these different areas of communication because we think that it's going to help us in improving our kind of core function of producing good, understandable and graphics and texts, and that can, help the uptake, increase the uptake of what we're actually working on ourselves. And so we might actually find ways of involving more early career scientists in developing these ideas. So it could involve the arts, it could involve new conceptualizations of concepts and so on. And then I was going to add something else, which is related to the IPCC had an expert meeting on communication last year, and you can find all these presentations online on the IPCC website. And there was a recommendation that authors who are really active in science communication should be sought. And it's a sort of a good attribute to have when you're nominating as an author, or when the IPCC is selecting authors, to look for some of these scientists who are really, really active and able in the way they communicate complex science issues. And just to add, I think if you're, got a lot of imagination and you develop a new graphic, a new visualization, I think just making the IPCC aware of this, it would be great, because you never know. I think there could be ways in which we could take inspiration from what you're doing and incorporate, and it helps the IPCC communicate its work. So ideas are very welcome.
Thank you very much. I see that we still have 13 minutes and 3 questions. So I think we will still try to handle these 3 questions in these minutes and then close the Q&A session, unfortunately. The first question comes from Carla Gulizia, who asked Renée, you have mentioned that one way the chapter scientists could be recruited was directly by the CLAs. I would like to know if you could give further information on how that procedure would be. Thank you so much all for the presentations and for organizing this webinar. Maybe Renée, you could give a brief answer to this question.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it very short. So this varies, the rule varies a little bit by report and by working group, and even by chapter, because it's quite an individual task. So this could be, the CLAs could be recruiting this through their personal institutions, through their own networks, or by issuing a call. It really quite varies there.
All right, good. Anyone short addition, or shall we move on to the next? Okay, I think that was well answered, very in a brief way. Okay, then we will go to the second question. Foskehat from Isaac Hanyan, and this person is asking, looking to the IPCC previous reports, there is no proper assessment of the abatement potential, neither country nor city level. What is your opinion about this, and is there any chance to include it in the AR6? Who would like to answer this? Maybe for Renée again, in the sense of the working group 3, or anyone else who would like?
Yeah, again, it's on the scientific content of the reports. I mean, it depends on what literature is available. So the IPCC assesses whatever literature is out there. So it really depends on what the assessments tell, and what that determines what the assessment can produce. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add a little bit more to that answer.
And stepping outside of my, what I really know about here, because it's more related to working group 3, but as far as I understand, analysis at the country level is not really sought by the panel, if I'm not mistaken. So in general, the analyses have been done at sort of the regional scale. It's sort of more of a larger scale assessment of understanding. But I think this is increasing in the AR6. So there's a lot more of a call from the panel to go to the regional scales and lower than that even, as far as possible. And then in terms of cities, I mean, there will be the special report on cities, of course. So I think this level of resolution in terms of mitigation would increase probably in AR6. But Renée and others could probably supplement that or correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll just bring in a working group 2 perspective. So certainly if you look at the vision document for working group 2, so each of the co-chairs for each of the working groups have written a vision for how they envisage the reports evolving, and cities have been recognised as being, I guess, sort of hotbeds of innovation when it comes to tackling climate change. So certainly in working group 2, we're expecting that there'll be an increased focus on cities across the report. We've got a proposed chapter dedicated solely to city settlements and key infrastructure. Cities will probably be a cross-cutting theme, and chapter 2 will consider, working group 2 will consider adaptation mitigation interactions, and there's also a co-sponsored meeting on cities and climate change that's going to happen in March next year in Edmonton, Canada.
Gabby. Mike.
Sorry, I hope that was giving some more insight into climate change, cities, and the IPCC. Then we go further to probably the last question, or the last question, from Pedro Lanilo. Is it already possible to sign up as an expert reviewer for the upcoming first order draft report on ocean and the cryosphere. Thank you. Maybe Sarah, do you have particular information on this already?
Yeah, I'll hand over to Working Group 2 because they're the main organisers of that special report.
Yeah, the call for reviews will open after the second lead author meeting. The announcement of the call will be around about April next year. So then you should check the IPCC website for the call to nominate as a review author.
Okay, great. Then we will go to the last question of this webinar from Matthias Editor. And he says, just a curious question. How does the IPCC engage with UNCC Learn for various countries, since the UNCC Learn is more or less promoting the UNFCCC Article 6? And then he adds, can such engagement between UNCC Learn and IPCC, if there are, be explored by early career scientists who want to be involved in the IPCC? Has any of you experience with collaborating with UNCC Learn? So this is a tough last question.
No, and I just checked, they're not an observer organisation, so I don't think, well, there is no formal link to the IPCC, but I don't know if Jonathan has any experience of links with them.
No, we don't have any links to them that I'm aware of. No, it's. I mean, we do. You mentioned just now the work that Robin's doing right now in the United States, and we do want to build up this this sort of educational side of developing educational materials and work out of IPCC reports, and there have been some other discussions going on about that with academies of science and so on. But with the UNCC itself, I'm not aware of any contacts.
Okay, good. Thank you. Then there might be an opportunity. Then I think we will close the webinar. And as this is one of the first webinars we run on such a topic, we would be very interested to actually get the feedback from all the participants. So we will send you a short survey, and would be really happy if you could take 5 minutes to just fill this in. It will really help us to improve our webinars for the next time. And then I wish to thank all the IPCC representatives that they could join this webinar, and for all the participants to be active in this call. You can find the recorded webinars online later on at the YES and APECS websites. Have a really good day. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye. Bye.